It's election eve in the United States. That would be Monday, November 4th, 2024. And that means it's also time for the Knee Jerks podcast of Eno, Nick, and Big Al. I'm the Big Al, the Equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit Paced podcaster, blogger, man about town, blah, 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 whatever. Joining me, as always, are my co-hosts, my partners in crime, whatever you want to call them. First off, we'll go to our West Coast sport correspondent, and that would be Nick Milanovich. How's things out in the Pacific Northwest, Nick?
Very nice, actually. We started off rainy, as you would expect, and ended up sunny, which I didn't expect, but we did. So everything's good.
That is good to hear. And as always, my longtime partner, who I've been doing this for over a decade and a half, and that would be the man who did not get the memo about the facial hair, and that would be Greg Eno of the the Greg Eno Substack, which is must reading. And as always, Greg, what's new? And also let us know about what you wrote about today on your Substack email.
Well, thank you very much, Big Al. I am Greg Eno from my Substack, gregeno.substack.com. Please subscribe. I would appreciate that. It's free right now. I will be in your inbox every Monday, sometimes more often than that, depending on what there is to write about. And Al mentioned the 15 years. I was, we're doing the show, we're recording the show on election eve here in the States. And it's only appropriate that Al, when we first started this program, Barack Obama had only been president for like 4 months in his first term. That's how long ago that was. 15 plus years ago, as you said. This is year 16, season 16, if you will.
Season 16, yeah.
And we still haven't talked about a Pistons playoff victory. That's the one thing on this program we have not talked about. Now, I'm not talking about series victory. I'm talking about winning a single playoff game. Has not been talked about in this program. We always tease Ray Scott about that when we have Ray on the show. And he always gets tickled by that when I bring that up. But that's absolutely true. We have not talked about a Pistons playoff victory since we've done this program. It's it's our bucket list. We got to knock off that bucket list one of these days. But please follow me also on Twitter or X, whatever you choose to call it, at Greg Eno. I would appreciate that as well. We have, as promised 2 weeks ago, our good friend Siddy Hall here. You can see him if you're watching this program on YouTube. You can see him on the lower left. He's joined us tonight to talk Pistons, but we're going to do something a little bit different tonight, which I think is going to be fun. This is at Siddy's request. It was a good idea. He said, "Hey, it's getting a little bit laborious to talk about the Pistons for obvious reasons." So he said, "Why don't we do something different?" And his suggestion was, we all come to the table with elements of the game of pro basketball that have changed since we started watching the game in the 70s and 80s, and comparing it to how it is now. And he said everything's on the table. It can be broadcasting, it can be anything that has to do with the NBA. Let's come to the table, and everybody kind of have a list, and we'll go through it, and we'll talk about each other's item on the list. I thought it was a great idea. I pitched it to you guys. You thought it was a good idea. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk Pistons for a little bit, but then we're going to talk mainly about how the NBA has changed in the past 40 to 50 years. And I think that's a terrific idea, and it's a lot of fun.
All right, that sounds good. But Greg, before we get to Siddy, why don't you we'll actually kind of do things the way we used to. So why don't you give us the first question of the birthday game? We haven't done it that way in a while.
Right, exactly. Before we get to any of that, we're going to play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
Yes.
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al and Nick a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if those gentlemen can correctly guess this person within the first two clues, tonight they will receive a Tanya Roberts poster. Now, this is a poster of the angel that's kind of like the Curly Joe of Charlie's Angels. It's the angel she was only on for one season. Still a hot-looking girl, but, not quite known. Not in the same league as...
I know, because I know. Who did she replace? I remember there was...
that's a good question.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember... God, it's been so long.
There was Cheryl Ladd.
I was in high school and this was all going on.
Right.
So, yeah.
There was Cheryl Ladd.
Ladd.
Who else?
Cheryl Ladd replaced Farrah Fawcett.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like there was another one.
There was another one, but I can't remember who it is. I was considering how young I was when that came out. I I was like 5 or 6 years old, so like.
Well, he had Kate Jackson and Jacqueline
Smith.
Right.
Or the other two.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But who
Thank
said
you.
sayonara?
Comes through in the clutch.
I don't know.
So. All right.
Daryl was only
stopped
after like one or
watching
two
by
seasons.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this person made his name in pro. This is a younger person. Usually, I do people born quite a long time ago. This person made his name in football. He was born on this date in 1982. Widely thought to be one of the best kick returners to ever play in the NFL. And I'm going to stop there. I don't want to give too much away because he's a younger dude. He's a little bit more in the consciousness in recent years. So I'm just going to stop there. Born in 1982, widely considered one of the best return specialists in NFL history.
Devin Hester?
Very good. Bingo. Bingo. Very good. Devin Hester.
It was on the tip of my tongue there, and then it finally hit me. I was trying to.
Devin's going into the Hall of Fame. He was elected to the Hall of Fame this year. So good for him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He's going in, and he should. I mean, he was outstanding. The Bears throughout their history have had really good punt returners. And the old time people, Hall might know, Siddy Hall might remember this one. Al, you too. Ron Smith, who was a very, very good return man, played for the Bears and I think the Rams as well. And they had Hester, and there was another one in there too.
Hell, they used Gale Sayers as a return.
Sayers, sure, absolutely. Mm-hmm. When he scored 6 touchdowns against the 49ers, one of them was by punt return and by kick return. I think it was a rush, a pass, a punt return, and a kick return in the same game. I mean, that's just as a rookie. I mean, that's amazing.
Well, the name that comes to my mind is Eric Metcalf. Was he prolific at that, or? But
he wasn't. He didn't play for the Bears, but yeah, he was good. He was good.
Oh, with the Bears, you're talking about.
There was Terry Metcalf too. Terry Metcalf.
Okay.
Who played for the Cardinals? He was very good too.
If we're talking old return men, we got to talk about Mel Gray.
Mel Gray was outstanding. Yes.
Lombardi.
Lombardi.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Lombardi.
All right.
So the Tanya Roberts poster is headed to southern Michigan, right by the.
Yeah, going towards the border.
Right.
All right. With that, Greg, I'll let you introduce our favorite NBA expert, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Siddy Hall has been coming on this program for a number of years now, and we're always excited to talk to him. And it's basketball season. We bring Siddy on usually at the beginning and at the end, sometimes in the middle. And here we are, beginning of another season. The Pistons are 2-5 as we speak. I believe that's the record. 2-5, and both of their wins on the road in Philly and in Brooklyn, albeit with the depleted Sixers team, but still they won. Although they got hammered at home by the Knicks, but we won't talk about that. But Siddy's with us right now. And Siddy, how you doing?
Doing very good. Thanks for having me on again. Hi, everybody. 2-5, but the Pistons have the Milwaukee Bucks in their rearview mirror. Who would have predicted that at the 7-game mark?
The Bucks are worse.
Maybe that is. They're 1-6.
What happened?
1-5.
What's going on there?
Their only win was like the Pistons. They beat Philly minus Embiid and Paul George, and they started to deteriorate last year, and it's accelerated. Bleeding talent, getting old. Obviously, the Lillard Jrue Holiday trade did not work out. They gave away Grayson Allen in that deal too. Never replaced him. Well, they replaced him with Malik Beasley, and now he's gone. And, Damian Lillard just isn't the guy he used to be. Giannis is all by himself. He was great last year.
This is Giannis' 11th year. I can't believe that. This is Giannis' 11th year.
He's still producing. He's the guy. Yeah. Brooke Lopez has gotten old. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Giannis fire sale this year.
Interesting. Okay.
What do you think of the... Sorry, I was going to ask speaking of them, I mean, they also brought in Doc Rivers mid-season after, which
you guys know I love Dwayne Casey, and when they hired Doc, I was like, bring in Dwayne Casey. Why not? Everyone just forgot about. They fell asleep on this guy because of the Piston win-loss record. And
you know what, Siddy? This is apropos of nothing, but do you think that Doc Rivers is a Hall of Fame bound coach?
Well, the way, the bar is pretty low, right? I don't know much about coaches, who gets in, and I don't pay a lot of attention to coaches getting in. But, Doc has his playing career too. So he was a pretty good player, and you add it all together. Yeah, probably. He's got one title with Boston.
Right.
But he's physically, when you just watch him walk around, I think he had back surgery. He walks funny. He looks like a guy who, you need endurance to coach in the NBA.
Right.
Speaking of which, right now, Pop is on the sideline at age 75 with an illness. It's not easy to coach. It's a lot of games, a lot of travel.
Sure.
And you gotta have your focus, just like running a business, and I don't know. I didn't like the Doc hiring, but he came, people, you hire people, so you got your excuse to fire them. Well, he had success, so we weren't stupid for hiring him instead of going a little bit outside the norm, which would be hiring a team, like I said, Dwayne Casey, who has much more energy than Doc Rivers. But who knows, man? From where we sit, those things are hard to analyze.
I see you popping in on Pistons Reddit. It's kind of funny. I've become kind of a Reddit junkie the last few months for a lot. I'm on a lot of different subreddits, whether it's politics, sports, whatever. And it's hilarious following whatever team. Like a game thread, for example, any team. And I like to go to different teams too to look at their game threads. And it's funny to me that the fan bases are all the same. You feel like the Reddit, the posts or comments are they're all from the same people, just spread out over different fan bases. There's no difference between a Pistons game day Reddit and a Bucks game. I'm just using it as an example. Bucks game day Reddit. They're all the same fans. They all say the same thing. They're all doom and gloom. And I see you popping in there every so often with a snarky comment. You had one the other day where you said you were complaining about somebody not being able to shoot. And you said, another Fred Vinson project.
I say a dial, emergency, call Fred Vinson.
Right.
He's our guy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's our guy. Yeah, I wrote the other day, a lot of complaining going on in here, after a loss. Every game's an overreaction. Every play, every possession is an explosion of reactions.
Right.
Everything's under the microscope. It's hard to keep perspective if you're in that room all the time.
Right. But it's kind of fun. I get a kick out of it, actually. But you're right. It's everything. If they win, somebody will post, we're back. We're so back. I love this team. And then they lose, and I hate this team, and sell the team. And it's usually sometimes the same person who says both those things. So what are your early impressions? This was supposed to be a season of kind of, the new coach, the new regime, kind of getting it wasn't supposed to be about wins and losses, of course, and it was supposed to be about improvement. I know it's early, 7 games, but anything that you take from, I know you watch the games, anything you take from it or no?
Well, just going back to preseason, the off season, just emotionally, I found myself in the doldrums entering this year. I had less enthusiasm for this year compared to most. And I was having trouble understanding. I think part of it was they were bringing in vets that were patch jobs. So, they weren't addressing any long-term issues there. They've had 2 straight years where they had chances to draft the best shooter in the draft. Grady Dick 2 years ago is now starting for Toronto, put up 31 the other night. We talked about Connect during our last show. I liked him, went to the Lakers. And so here we are kind of with that same group who individually, player by player, looks okay, but collectively, I was finding myself having trouble generating enthusiasm entering the year. But now, they've gotten going, 2-5. Just looking ahead, we're going to learn a lot this month because they are hitting a weak spot in the schedule, about their next 15 games. I think the next 12 games look winnable. Even tonight with the Lakers, that might be their toughest matchup of the 12. And Lakers it's winnable. They're at home.
Lakers are funny. They're a weird team.
Well, they're missing guys. They don't have a lot of depth. And the Pistons do have depth. They're healthy. Just missing Asar Thompson. So they go 10 or 11 deep. And they're going to catch Orlando with Banchero out. A lot of injuries in the league right now. I've never seen so many injuries this early in the season. So, like when they beat Philly, they were missing Embiid and George. And by the way, talking about Reddit, the reaction to that win, the fans just went crazy attacking Monty Williams because that was the game where we saw Cade and Jaden Ivey perform well at the same time. and everybody was just screaming about Monty Williams. The decision last year to continue to ride Killian Hayes as a starting point guard, and put Jaden Ivey in a corner for 3-point shooting. I mean, it didn't make sense.
Right.
And so now to see it play out, that's a relief. Look, let's compare Detroit to Orlando. Orlando 2 years ago, they were 5-20 in a bad spot, seemed to be, on this treadmill of mediocrity. And then they suddenly got good. Where did it come from? They had 3 guys emerge. It was Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs. They all rose together at the same time. They had lots of support pieces in place, and they became a playoff team. So Detroit, you got to ask the same question. Who are those 3 guys going to be? Obviously, one's Cade, but who are the other 2? I can only possibly see Jaden. By saying 3 guys, I mean guys that are playing at or near an all-star game level. And Jaden Ivey, I'm not predicting it, but it seems like it's not impossible. But who would be the 3rd guy? Is it going to be Jalen Duren? If it's not him, who? There's nobody. So again, that limits what this team can do, I think, and what we can expect.
What in Ivey's game have you seen that encourages you? I know that he seems to be getting a lot of praise by the fans on social media. They seem to feel like he's on the verge of busting out. Do you feel the same way, or what is it about his game that you think maybe is indeed getting better?
I've said it before. He's a high energy tornado. I mean, he broke Chris Paul's wrist last year. He just ran through him. He plays at that level. He was compared to Russell Westbrook coming out. It's a good comparison. Westbrook just had a motor that was different than everybody else's. And Ivey has it too. He makes mistakes. They're frustrating to watch. It seems like he's reduced it a little bit. He's been set free by Bickerstaff. He's not being restrained. But ultimately, when you think about, all the Piston teams, and just players in general, you got to have a go-to move, a way to score that people can't take away from you. You think back to like Vinnie Johnson, he had it. Your pure shooters always have it. A way to score that is like your signature, right? And on the Pistons, they don't have that. What is Jalen Duren's signature move? He doesn't have one. Isaiah Stewart, same thing. Ivey gets to the rim. He gets to the rim in the half court. He's just still trying to, iron out the wrinkles a little bit, finish a little better. But opponents are aware of him. And that makes him exciting. And that makes him a potential all-star. He brings something to the table that's unique. It's hard to get to the rim. And, think of Killian Hayes. I mean, he couldn't get within 8 feet of the rim. So what a difference that makes.
And Killian Hayes is, correct me if I'm wrong, is not in the NBA currently, correct?
Not in the league. He, I thought he was going to be picked up. Brooklyn signed him despite already having a lot of backcourt players. He never appeared in a preseason game. His old hip injury appeared to come back. So I don't know where he is now. I am very surprised, but something's going on in the NBA. There's like an orthodoxy right now about, the efficiencies and shooting percentages and 3-point shooting, because remember Amadou Diallo, he was, I thought he was a very fine player for the Pistons 2 years ago. Played 1 game last year, 6 minutes. He's out of the league. Markelle Fultz, number 1 pick in the draft, 7 years ago? Played the last few years with Orlando, played well, it seemed. Out of the league. He's just sitting out there. And, what does he have in common? Well, he can't, all those guys, they don't shoot the 3. And there's almost like this orthodoxy, which saddens me a little bit, that they, even with these 15-man rosters and 3 two-way contracts, that you can't find a place for these guys. I don't agree with it, but that's just the way it is now. They've got all these cameras now that can analyze everything that we don't have privy to. Maybe there's data out there supporting that. Clearly, Boston and Indiana had the best offenses last year, and what they had in common was every player on the floor could shoot the ball. So, that's the goal, I suppose. But anyway, yeah, Killian's out.
We're talking with Siddy Hall, our resident NBA guru here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my gregeno.substack.com. Big Al Beaton is here, of course, and let's go to Nick Milanovich next. What you got for Siddy Hall?
Siddy, one of the things, when I watch basketball games, I probably don't watch in as much detail as most people, but I kind of look for patterns that happen, kind of like larger patterns. Like what I remember with the Pistons the last several years, like say the last 3 for sure, is that they would have this pattern of they would have the one quarter that's a disaster. Usually it was the first quarter where they'd go down almost like by design, 20 to 30 points down, and then they would maintain that deficit for the rest of the game. And so far this season, I've only seen it once against, it was particularly disastrous against the Knicks. First of all, I don't know where that pattern came from because it was just like a collapse in one quarter, and it just doomed them from the very beginning. Do you see anything kind of like small sample size, but do you see any of that kind of like breaking that pattern?
Yeah, well, that you're describing bad teams, right? Bad teams can hang with other teams for 3 quarters. And that has been a problem with Detroit, an issue. That New York game, what a disaster. By the way, the Knicks in that game, they had more than 20. They took 20 extra shots than Detroit. Last year, in the entire league, there were only 11 games where one team took 20 or more extra shots. And often that's going to be a result of one team shooting badly, the other team shooting great, team shooting poorly, gets extra rebounding opportunities, etc. But this was not the case. The Knicks shot the ball better than Detroit and got the 20 extra shots. So that was a complete clubbing. And yeah, I remember I made a snarky comment on Reddit when the Pistons cut the lead to 49-17. I was like, hey, at least they're not up. They cut into their triple advantage. It was 39-13 after 1, and they managed to get it down below triple at home. But Nick, that's what bad teams look like. Like I've been following Portland this year. I'm curious about them. They've been doing that too. They actually were tied with Oklahoma City at halftime recently, which seemed like a huge mismatch, right? Oklahoma City just steamrolling teams. And they were tied at halftime, and then they lost by 25. So, that's what bad teams do. But, the Pistons have more depth, so that should reduce that happening with the vets. Last year, remember, they had those horrific bench lineups that Monty would throw out there with no starters, and it was almost on cue to happen, right?
Well, a lot of those deficits came even with the starters on, right? They couldn't buy themselves a lead, even, let alone a victory.
Well, last year, one of the trends was the starters might hang tough for the first 8 minutes of the game. Maybe even have a 2-point lead, and then things would fall apart. But, again, this is this observation. You got to look at the data, and I'm sure the Pistons provided all the different ways of getting clobbered last year in their 14-win season. By the way, I just want to mention, too, since the James Wiseman era, since he first stepped on a Piston floor after the Saddiq Bey trade, the Pistons are now 18-95. So that's
oh my god,
that's where we're at.
You mentioned
I don't want to pin it on that poor guy because he's out for the season again. So
oh god, you mentioned Portland. You're following Portland, and how much longer do they go with the Chauncey Billups experiment? Chauncey's
I'm I'm
longer than
stunned.
any NBA coach that typically you don't get that many years of losing as Chauncey's gotten. Is that deference to him as a player, or what is going on with that? I mean, I love Chauncey Billups, but I just don't.
I don't know. I have no idea. I thought for sure he was going to get fired after year one. You know, they went from Terry Stotts, who seemed to squeeze a lot out of those teams.
Yeah.
And those Damian Lillard teams didn't seem to have that much talent. And they were pretty successful. They were often like third or fourth in the West.
Right.
They always seemed to be undermanned, but they won. Right. And then Chauncey comes in and things went south. So I don't know. Maybe the owner just doesn't want to pay for multiple coaches. Maybe he's the tank commander. You know, this is the Connor Flagg draft. Everyone loves this draft. Supposedly there are 3 or 4 good guys. And by the way, last year's draft, people were saying like the top pick would go number 9 or 10 in a normal draft. Yeah, it's looking that way. I've been looking around at these guys. I don't see anyone that jumps out at you, you know, as being it's early. It's way too early, of course, but it does look like you know, no studs.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Siddy Hall here, our NBA guru on the Knee Jerks. Let's bring Big Alan. What you got for Siddy Hall?
Well, yeah, I'm going to mention Joel Embiid, because this will kind of lead us into our next discussion with the NBA. And what's your take, Siddy, on him being load managed before the season even started? He didn't play in the opening night for the Sixers. And him getting into an altercation with a columnist the other night, you know, stuff like that happens. But that right there is where, you know, people pay big money to get, you know, to see players play. And him not even suiting up on opening night, I find that's the sort of stuff that really turns people off on the league in general, don't you think?
Well, Embiid, you know, Philly, he's never there, and when they need him in the finals, he's never there. The only time I remember him being there was when they lost to Toronto, you know, when Kawhi hit that crazy shot to push Toronto past Philly. But you got to have your team, you know, in the playoffs. And that's what the whole league figured out. Teams no longer care about home court advantage in the playoffs. They're not going to fight tooth and nail to get home court advantage and just to lose it in one game. They're into preservation, and it got to a point where almost nobody was even playing 60 games.
Yeah.
So the league had to step in last year and tie it into, you know, awards and things to put some carrots in front of these guys to provide them with more incentive. You know, the teams don't want these guys playing 82 games. You know, but that's the way it is. That the money's rolling in, and they can't, you know, resist it. If it were, you know, sane, the league was sane, they would be playing probably each team, they'd play 2 games a week. You know, play 2 games a week for 26 weeks and have 52 games. That's plenty. And then, you know, play every third game, every third day, once every 3 days, play 58 games, play every team twice. And then guys would hopefully stay healthier. But I don't blame Philly at all. Al, it doesn't bother me. I understand their position. Joel Embiid last year, the first half of the season, he was easily the best player in the league. He was just destroying the whole league. You couldn't stop him. He was better than ever. He was doing everything. You could not stop Joel Embiid. And then he just completely deteriorated, wasn't there in the playoffs. He played, was terrible, could barely move. Yeah, they're just going to try and mothball him until they need him.
You know, it would be nice if and this would never happen. I know that, but if the league could somehow somehow control these load nights and say, look, you can do all that load stuff at home, but you got to play all 41 road games. And the reason I say that is because the league. If I'm a fan in Detroit, I buy a ticket, and these tickets aren't cheap, by the way. Buy a ticket to go to Little Caesars Arena. The Sixers are in town, okay. And it's like going to a play, and they announce 5 minutes before the show starts that the star of the play isn't going to be in. It's going to be their understudy. I don't want to spend $100 for a ticket to go see the Sixers play, only to be told that Embiid's not playing because load management. You know, do all that load management stuff in the home games. Play the road games. play. These guys have got to be seen by the rest of the fans in the NBA. That's my opinion. I know it's not going to happen, but that's where you want to. That's where you want to see these guys. I want to see them. I want to see the big stars coming into town. I want to see them sitting on the bench in street clothes because it's their load management night. I pay good money to go down to see. Theoretically, I'm spending a lot of money to go down to the stadium, pay a ton of money for parking, pay a ton of money for concessions. I want to see the best players from the other team.
What astonishes me is just how rarely Nikola Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, they never play each other. You almost never see them play against each other. One of them's going to be hurt. They're in different conferences.
Right.
Then you got the best of 7 in the playoffs. So if they don't get the right matchup, they don't see each other. To me, that's disappointing. I want to see these guys go head to head in big games.
Right.
Never happens.
Yeah, that's another good point.
That's a different subject. You've heard me talk about that. I'm anti best of 7.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why. But anyway, I hear you. I don't know. Joel Embiid, he has a long history of injuries. So, yeah. It's hard for me to take that position, a strong position against him because this has been going on for 5 years.
Well, let's move on to the next part of our discussion, the one that we teased out at the top of the show, and that is we're going to go around the horn and we're going to each present to the group something from the NBA that has changed from the time we started watching the NBA as young men, kids, whatever you want to call it, and compare it to what's happening today. And we'll each kind of toss one out, and we'll have a little bit of fun with it. Some of this will be serious, some of it will be not so serious. We'll have a lot of fun, whatever it is. And I guess I'll start only because this has been something that I tweeted out the other day. I tweeted out, Siddy, a photo of Chuck Daly, dressed all Natalie, daddy rich with the tight suits and the ties and the creased shirts and everything. And I said, I miss when NBA coaches dress like this. And now I look on the sidelines and I see all these guys wearing track suits, like they're coaching freaking, Olympic games or something, and with tennis shoes on, track suits on. I miss the days of the Natalie dressed coach. Sometimes you look back in some of those pictures of the 70s from like the ABA and the NBA, Larry Brown wearing jean overalls, the wild open collar shirts that Doug Moe would wear or Kevin Lockery. I miss that kind of stuff. And now all I get are cookie cutter track suits. And I know that started during the COVID era, during the bubble, and it became the norm. And I miss when the coaches on the sidelines dressed like they were going to a wedding or something instead of just holding practice. You may as well put a whistle around their neck. What do you guys think about that?
Who wants to jump in? I'll jump in. Yeah, you want to jump in, Nick? You go, please.
Sure. Well, it kind of more triggered me with something else I was thinking of, but yeah, it does look really different. And actually some of them look really kind of sloppy or sort of ugly. They look like they're going to work in their yard, or like the coach is going to work in the yard.
Well, the thing is, Greg, is that they can't license suits.
There you go.
They have had the coaches wear license.
Almighty dollar. Yeah. Almighty dollar.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Well, I always felt that the suits were weird. I thought it was weird to wear a suit and tie for a basketball game. So I am not a fan of going back to that. You do bring up an interesting point, though. Yeah, Connie Mack. But you bring up a good point, though, that there is no diversity in clothing. Everyone's wearing the same zip up to the neck.
Right.
It is rather monotonous. Like they don't seem to have the freedom to perhaps wear something more modern and stylish, let's say, like maybe you're going to a club instead of going to a wedding. But I'm not a fan of the suits. I always felt sorry for them having to wear those things while coaching basketball. It didn't seem normal to me.
Good point. Okay, let's go. Who's next? Let's go, Nick. Nick, what you got?
Actually, the one thing that stuck out to me, and I think especially because of last season, is the NBA All-Star game seems to be really like a different animal now. I mean, it's just, I think last year just deteriorated to rubble, basically. And I feel that I got sick of all-star games in general just because they don't mean anything. But it seems like I started watching in the 80s, and it's like they tried to play a basketball game, if not, they weren't trying to kill themselves like they would in a regular season game, but they actually tried to play basketball to win. And now last year was just a circus of some kind. It was really a joke, and it's just like, might as well just shut down the All-Star game altogether. Just give them everybody a week rest, and talk about load management, right? Just take a week off, and like your spring break or whatever the hell you want to call it, and just give us all a rest. So that's kind of the one of the things
I haven't watched an All-Star game in like 30 some years. I stopped a long time ago. They used to, yeah, you're right, Nick. They used to try. There were some classic All-Star games in the Jordan era where they wanted to win. They were playing for pride, and they were yelling at refs and arguing and getting into it. And now it is pathetic. I mean, I'll catch glimpses. It is absolutely pathetic. I follow the league religiously. I view the All-Star break as a break for myself, so I don't watch it. But they got to keep themselves in the news, right?
Yeah, I mean, I gave up on All-Star games for all sports. I don't care at all. So,
but Nick, I feel the same way about the slam dunk contest. I just. It doesn't do anything for me. I'm vaguely interested in 3-point shooting. That's kind of like a game of horse, it's a cool challenge, but yeah, I'm with you, man. What's anyone else think?
Now, what you got? Let's go to Big Al next. Let's go to Big Al.
I completely agree. Every All-Star game is ridiculous. The NFL did the right thing by just getting rid of the Pro Bowl altogether and just going with the skills competition. And if every other league did that, I'd be fine with that. I wouldn't watch that either, but regardless. There's a few things that, because I remember becoming a fan of the game in the 70s and 80s. And, I loved watching the Bad Boys Pistons grow from the Isaiah Thomas draft into that juggernaut they became. So that's my era of basketball. But, what really kind of bugs me compared to today now is, and Siddy kind of mentioned this earlier, was the complete devaluation of the regular season. And that is now, if you don't win a ring, your season was a complete failure. You see that, going back to Reddit or Twitter again, you see people calling players' careers failures because they didn't win a ring, as the rings culture. And it really felt like it just meant the regular season just seemed to mean so much more, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s. It's been in the last decade or so, as the city was kind of talking about with the load management, that the regular season just seems to become so devalued to the point where, it's even like the players sometimes feel like they're going through the motions and everybody's just waiting for the playoffs to start, or at least the play-in series to start. And it's really starting to turn me off the game of basketball altogether. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I think the league is super competitive right now, and it's very deep. I think the talent is deeper than it's ever been. And that is one of the reasons why they can compete, not at quite the top level, but they can compete and win games when guys are out of the lineup. Yeah. It's still intense. Even though these guys are making tons of money, it's intense. Everyone's focused on them. You got the gamblers, you got the social media. I think the intensity is as high as it's ever been, but they're not going to play their guys 82 games,
And that's the difference. That back in the day, those guys played every single game, every game they could. And maybe the thing is, though, you're maybe right. Maybe that shortened some careers. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was done by the time he was 32 years old. And that guy went through some wars. So maybe that does play into it. Maybe there's some sense to it. I just kind of missed that era. I know, and I do agree with some of the stuff you're saying there, Siddy, but it just feels like, I don't want to say watered down, but, maybe it's the, as we're kind of talking into this, it might lead to another thing I see is that a lot of the offenses see the same. back in the day, the Pistons played differently from the Celtics, who played differently from the Lakers, who played differently from the Sixers, who play, like that. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it just feels like almost every team, especially the bad ones, seem to play this 4 or 5 out game where like as you said, Siddy, it's turning into a game of horse. I know, and Greg, I know this kind of comes up when we have Coach on. He just laments the loss of the mid-range game. And I know analytics just tears that apart. That your best shots are either at the rim or beyond the 3-point line. But it seems like now you have this whole wasted space on the court now. That the game either happens in the paint or it happens behind the 3-point line. It doesn't, and there's nothing going on in the rest of the court.
I love the modern game. I'm a big fan of the modern game. But I did have for the first time just this week, I had a little hankering to see guys shoot 2-pointers. And I think it was brought on. I was watching a Miami game, and Tyler Hero hit a couple of really nice shots, bank shots that were like 6 or 8 feet away. And then the other team went down and someone did another cool 2-point shot. And one of the commentators, it might have been Greg Kelser, I don't know, said, "Hey, feels like we're back in the 80s. Yeah. This is what 80s basketball looked like, where you didn't know exactly what your distance was, where you're shooting. Now they know where they are. They're behind the line or they're within a few feet of the basket. And there's an artistry that's kind of missing, and that was cool. So there are trade-offs, though. In the old game, they had that inside-outside game with the big man and lots of fouls, lots of free throws. That was monotonous, too. Let's not romanticize it. Which kind of brings me to one of my things on the list. In the old days, with a 12-man roster, they used to carry 5 bigs. Yeah. If you were big and could chew bubble gum, you had a job. And now teams carry two guys out of 15, 3. So that 5 out of 12 used to be devoted to that. I don't miss it. And the guy to me that symbolized that era, if you remember, this guy is Mark Bryant. Do you remember Mark Bryant?
Sure. Yeah, I do.
Seton Hall, first round draft pick. I'm going to call up his stats real fast, but he had like a 15-year career. The guy couldn't even dunk the basketball. And he just kept getting passed around because everybody needed 5 bigs.
Yeah. Kind of like
said, okay.
He
played, how many games did he play? Played 800 games, 15 years. He started 198. Never scored more than 6 points a game, like once.
You know who else was like that?
Career.
You know who else was like that? There were a couple of guys that come to mind. One from the more 70s and maybe not 70s, 80s, and one a little bit maybe into the 2000s. One of them was Ed Neely. That he comes to mind.
Yeah.
And another one was Jeff Foster. And Jeff Foster was one of the best rebounders I've ever seen. And I think largely kept him in the NBA, played a lot of time, mainly for the Pacers. But I think about Ed Neely a lot. He was the same kind of guy. He got passed around. I don't know how many teams he played, 1 million teams. And he was not, he was just like the Bryant thing you're talking about. You wonder how long this guy stayed in the NBA. It was unbelievable.
He was the barrel-chested. I remember he played with the Bulls for a while. I guess I'm spelling his name wrong, huh? There it is. Yeah, he played 11 years.
Yeah.
And, before the 3, started getting popular, 540 games.
Yeah.
Caldwell Jones, he was a rim protector. He played 1,000 some games, I think.
Right.
But I don't miss that. See, today's version of that is the have jump shot will travel version of a player. If you can shoot a 3, you're going to get a job.
Right.
And you keep, moving around the league.
Right.
And I'd rather watch that. I think it's more interesting.
Another one on my list, I'm going to kind of piggyback a little bit off what Al said. He was talking about how different teams would play different styles. And I kind of miss the dynasties. I kind of miss where you had teams that wore the black hats all the time. For a while, it was the Celtics. I kind of miss it when the Celtics and Lakers were going back and forth every year for the title. Then when the Pistons came in and kind of disrupted that, Then it was Pistons, Celtics had some good playoff wars, and of course Pistons, Lakers, and then of course it became the Bulls were so good, they won 70 games or whatever, and just to even beat them in the regular season was considered like that major season. If you beat the Bulls in the regular season, forget the playoffs. And I kind of miss having those dynasties, like those teams that were so far in a way above. I know it sounds counterintuitive because why would you want that? But I just thought I just think that the NBA was interesting when there were teams like the Warriors were for a while, where they just seemed to be like impenetrable. Nobody could ever beat them in a playoff series, and they wouldn't get like upset on occasion. I kind of miss those dynasties, if you will. Now there's really I don't even know the last time a team won the title back to back, but I just kind of miss when we had the studs, kind of like in the old days of the Big Ten football, where it was Michigan and Ohio State and everybody else. I kind of miss that, where you had the stud teams for a while going, knocking each other out. Kind of what you were saying, Siddy, about these guys never playing each other, the stars. I kind of miss those, the Celtics, Pistons, Celtics, Lakers stuff, Bulls, Pistons. I kind of miss that.
Yeah, we're in a different era. Every game's on TV. You got to know your players. They rotate from team to team now. I mean, you look at Toronto when they won the championship. Kawhi Leonard bailed.
Right.
How are you going to have rivalries when your top player leaves? Stick comes in for 1 year, wins the ring for him, and leaves. Right. So, yeah, there are no rivalries right now. It really, I can't give you one.
Yeah.
Maybe they're short-lived. They flare up and then they go out. It doesn't really exist now.
Yeah.
But for me though, I'm a hardcore fan. I know who all the players are. I like the depth on all these teams. I think that it's highly competitive right now, except for Boston, Oklahoma City, and they have emerged. It seemed to be head and shoulders above the rest. But the rules are designed now for parity, making it extra difficult to form a dynasty and keep it. What Boston's doing right now is amazing. They got all these guys in their prime.
Right.
That is not easy to do.
That's what the Warriors did back when they had Klay Thompson and Steph, and who was the third guy?
Draymond.
Yeah. Draymond was in there.
And then they added Durant. Well, Boston's probably going to pay huge penalty. The owners in the last CBA, they put in more rules to penalize themselves to try to create parity. So Boston's going to have to make a huge decision. They're probably going to pay massive fines, maybe forfeit first-round draft picks to keep this team together and try to win as many titles as they can, because everyone's the same age, except for Drew. Drew Holiday is older, but it's hard to put a team together where everyone's 27 years old.
Right.
You gotta, and the team's for sale, by the way. They're gonna try and cash out the chips, I guess. If anyone's got $6 billion.
Nick, you got another one on your list?
Well, I think this kind of I got a few, but I'm piggybacking on what you guys are talking about. I don't remember in the 80s there being the super team where a bunch of free agents would go and all sign suddenly with a team. It feels like that started with LeBron James when he went down to Miami, and he pulled in Bosch and Wade was already there, and but then you had a more recent one in Brooklyn where Durant went there with Kyrie, and then Harden got there, and there was somebody else too, I think, and that just blew up instantly. So that never went anywhere. So yeah.
Good old Kyrie Irving. That guy's poison, man.
That guy's the glue that holds everything together, right?
He's the chaos agent, Yeah, I blame Kyrie for that. That team was just perfect. And before Harden arrived, it was they had Durant and Kyrie, and that team was ready to go. And and then Kyrie started acting weird. And they pulled the trigger on Harden, traded Jared Allen away. But anyway, I digress. What you're saying is a good point. That is a change, yeah. Players have more control now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Al, what you got on your list? I got another one on your list, number 2.
Well, yeah, just I will say this, that the league does have how it's changed broadcast wise is that I'm old enough to remember when the NBA finals were on tape delay.
Yes. Yes.
Late at, I think it was like 11:30 at night.
Yeah, you're right.
And that is, and to tell someone that now that one of the big 4 pro sports leagues had their the pinnacle, their championship tape delayed until late night, and would just blow people's minds. But that really shows just how off the radar the NBA had become in the late 70s. And to see where it's at now, where it's arguably second in popularity to the NFL, it's amazing how much things had changed. Especially, honestly, that really, and that's what the talk of, well, Magic and Larry Bird saved the league because they came in the league at the same time that rivalry began. And the 80s happened where all of a sudden the league started to explode because it was just some very entertaining basketball, entertaining players. But to see it now where the game is covered there is so much coverage of the league today, it's almost over. It probably is safe to say it's overwhelming. But consider where it was, 40 some years ago, 45 years ago. It's just leaps and bounds advanced compared to how people even cared about it back then.
It reminds me of a moment. I remember in 1985 or 86, I was living in Boston, and Bob Ryan, he had the, it was the beat writer for the Celtics, and they used to give him a huge space on every Sunday. He took up almost like a whole page with his thoughts. And I still remember him writing, he said, my sources tell me that Otis Thorpe is a beast. Because Otis Thorpe played in Sacramento. You never saw him play unless you lived in the West Coast city. We didn't even know what he looked like. I mean, he played, I believe, at Providence. So he was like, people had local interest in him. But he was a rumor, right? Nothing was on TV. That was in 85. So things had improved by then compared to what you're talking about, Al. But yeah, there was no coverage.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great point. That the West Coast was like this mysterious thing that happened out there.
Like, how many games did the Pistons televise from Channel 50? Do you remember per year?
I don't remember. It couldn't have been. It wasn't half the season.
I would bet like a third of the season.
Yeah.
Probably.
Then past sports came in and televised just about every game.
Yeah.
And every team started to have its own past sports. Their own paid cable coverage. So every game was televised. Siddy, what else you got on your list? You got another item on your list?
Well, I got like a little weird one. I think one of my observations is that today, compared to the old days, the enthusiasm of the players on the bench is so much higher than it used to be. In the old days, Greg, me and you used to laugh. The players almost had like a studied nonchalance or appearance of not caring about what was happening on the floor. They ignored their coaches during timeouts.
Right.
Now you've got these bigger rosters. The players are into the game. They react to what's happening on the floor. They're blocking the fans in front of them often, standing and cheering. And I think it's cool. I think it's another sign of why the game is better now. You can't fake that.
I'm going to go with, and I'm going to once again sound like old man shouting at the clouds. I get it. Get off my lawn, guy. But what gets me cranky are the uniforms. Drives me crazy. I used to be able to tune in a game, see a team wearing white and a team wearing dark. I knew instantly where the game was played. I knew, okay, the team at white is at home. The team at dark is on the road. Now I tune into a Pistons game. They wear dark at home. They wear white at home. They wear white on the road. They wear goofy alternate jerseys that I don't know. It can be dark or white. These teams wear these goofy alternate jerseys that are just horrendous. And I miss the days of just, look, you wear dark on the road, white at home. That's end of story. End of story. And I see these uniforms now. I don't know what they're going to wear night to night. I don't even know how they decide what they're going to wear from night to night. I don't know how if you go on a road trip, you got to pack all your uniforms because you don't know what the other team is going to wear at home. And I that drives me nuts. The whole uniform thing I guess
Say
I'm.
it, Al. You said it already about the coaches. Say it.
Obviously, I have a problem with threads. I have a thread problem. I get it.
Yeah,
But
he's a fashion maven. We're talking about.
Really,
marketing. No, the marketing. You got to mark things you can. I agree with you, Greg. I feel that way about football. I turn on and see NFL highlights, and I don't know who I'm looking at sometimes.
Yeah.
So for people that like me, I don't follow it closely. I'm clueless.
I complain that the cheerleaders still wear clothes, so I don't know.
Does the NFL, they still have their cheerleaders?
I think so.
Right?
Do you remember Siddy and Al when the Lions would have cheerleaders at the Silverdome that were from high schools?
Yes, I do remember that. That they were one of the last holdouts, having their own dedicated, essentially cheerleading dance squad. They would have a different high school team cheerleading squad in each corner of the end zone.
Right.
It was and people like the Cowboys have what they have, and we get this.
Right.
It was, but the Lions were weirdly run for a long time with stuff.
Yes, they were. Well, the Pistons had the classy chassis.
Yeah, classy chassis.
That was their cheerleaders. Classy chassis.
Tom Wilson was a little more modern than the Lions leadership. They had a 27-year-old CEO, right?
Yeah.
So,
anybody else have anything else on their list?
I do. I want to throw one more out there because
Sure.
there have been rumors about NBA expansion, franchise valuations. I remember in 1988, 89, around there when Miami and Charlotte entered the league. And if my memory serves me correct, they each paid, I think, $32 million to receive their franchise. Mm-hmm. And the rumors now are that the next, maybe Seattle, maybe Vegas are going to get teams, and it's probably going to be 100-fold greater, maybe 200-fold greater. 2 billion, 3 billion, 6 billion. We don't know yet, but those are the rumors. That's just in 35 years. Think about that.
Well,
when was the last time the NBA expanded?
I think that would have been Vancouver, the Grizzlies, I believe.
Yeah.
No, didn't. What about Charlotte Bobcats?
Yeah, right? You're right, Charlotte. Yeah, they had to even it out, right? It was Charlotte. That was 20 years ago. I can't remember.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Well, that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, like the Pistons themselves in the last 15 years, Goris bought them for like $320 million approximately. Now they're like $3 billion.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was just going to say, Nick. Exactly.
Yeah.
Tom Gore's got the Pistons, and he didn't get just the Pistons. He got all of Palace Entertainment, including the Palace and everything, and Pine Knob and everything.
Right.
He got that for a song, and as you said, now sky's the limit on valuation of that.
I just looked it up. Pistons are number 12 in attendance last season.
What? No way.
Yeah. Last year, 12th. They were even ahead of the Lakers. I'm like, how the hell is this possible? Yes. Yes.
Or they must. There's some shady bookwork going on there, man. Some bookkeeping.
That's the only thing.
Ticket for $1, minutes before each game, right?
That could very well be. It's not that different than elections, I guess, but since we're on election eve, but
Tom Gore's got such a great deal. He could afford to just blow up Palace. No problem. I still won. Came out ahead. So, I think we could go on for a long time on this subject. There's a lot of change. A lot of changes have taken place. But
like Helen Molnett remembers going to Pistons games at Cobo Arena when it was like maybe 10,000 would have been a sellout there, But that was an intimate setting. It was actually a great place to watch a game compared to what some of these places are like now. It was almost like a small college arena.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And now they play.
Not quite Callahan, but it was close.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Callahan was real small. I love that place.
You still play there. You still play there.
Playing there. the empty Callahan Hall, right? The near empty. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, as we're talking about history, then going back to how Dick Vitale had that place absolutely rocking in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
that
he
was
did.
the
I was
in-place
witness to
there
that.
for
It was
years.
amazing.
Yeah.
Ooh. It was amazing when he was
they bring
there.
a
That was a
DePaul
magical moment.
DePaul with Mark Aguirre would show up, and Al McGuire would bring his Marquette team in there on occasion. Dickey had some good matchups in that building. I mean, he brought some big time schools in because, of course, UD at the time was an independent, and Dickey brought in some really good competition to play in that building. I remember when they brought in Eastern Michigan did too. They had in the early 80s they had Aguirre and DePaul in with Ray Meyer and everybody coaching, and but Dickey had some really big time opponents in that building, and but I just think that building to me has hindered the recruiting for that school. It's not a help anymore. But I don't know that they have the money to either renovate it or knock it down and build something else. But
Well, one thing I'd like to add to those UD games with Dick Vitale, those crowds were not corporate crowds.
No.
Those were knowledgeable fans.
Yes, absolutely.
And they were vocal. Those were good crowds.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, for sure. Well, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad you suggested this. We should do this again. We should come back and do more of this. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, why not? We can mix it up. We can make it a segment, part of the basketball chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking about when will Asar Thompson return and what will it mean?
Right.
We can all talk about when we wore an onion on our belt instead. So.
All right. Well, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You can follow Siddy on Twitter. He's there on occasion at Siddy Hall. Poking on Pistons Reddit. He chimes in every so often with his snarky comments and then runs away like he usually does. But we're always happy to have him here. And thanks again, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. So long.
Thanks,
okay.
Siddy.
Good night.
See you, Siddy.
That was fun.
As always, that was fun.
It was different.
Yeah.
Enjoyed that.
All right, now we got to get. Now we're done talking about fun things, and we have to get back to what's. I would say fun. Lions are fun right now.
Yeah, very fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Red Wings are not so fun because that's we'll touch base on both of those teams. There's not really much going on with the Tigers other than was second base so bad this year in the American League, guys, that Colt Keefe was a nominee for a Silver Slugger. Did you see that today? Yes.
No.
Did you not see that?
There were 4 second basemen nominated for the Silver Slugger in the American League. Colt Keefe and his 690 OPS was one of them. I guess the AL was that weak in second base.
Wow.
Yeah. But also Riley Green was nominated for a Silver Slugger as well. So, and he was, he's kind of deserving of it. But yeah, I saw that go, and because I saw the post and it was set up. The Tigers had 2 players nominated for a Silver Slugger. Okay, Green makes sense. Who's the other guy? And it was Colt Keith. I'm like, what? Oh my God. Okay, now we got our Tigers talk out of the way, so we can say we covered them. All right. I guess we really should leave with the Lions because they have been. There's been so much going on with the Lions right now, guys, and it's like Jameson Williams getting suspended for 2 games is barely a blip on the radar of this team.
Right.
They didn't even miss him.
And
they're winning in dominant fashion in a way I don't think any of us ever seen. What they hang 45 on Tennessee.
Yeah.
And and Jared Goff threw for 90 yards or something. It ended up like 120 or something like that. It was something ridiculous like that. And then yesterday, they play this horrible weather in Lambeau Field in Green Bay. I mean, it's literally, Ollie Williams would have been out there from Family Guy saying, it ran sideways, as he would say from Family Guy. And that's exactly what it was doing. Yet, and there was all this talk about, Jared Goff is not a cold weather quarterback. Jared Goff can't play in the rain. The Lions are a dome team. They can't handle this. And yet, that game never, ever felt like the Lions were in danger. It ended up being 24-14, but they were up 3 scores almost the entire second half, and the Lions were like, all we got to do is protect the football. If we don't turn it over, we're going to win this game, and that's exactly what they did. So I guess first off, guys, it's just like, Greg, can you believe how the Lions seem to be winning games? They're blowing teams out in some of the weirdest fashion I've ever seen.
Yeah, this is a team that, and this, I think this is what makes this team so remarkable, is that they can win in so many different ways. And you look back at some of the great teams in NFL history, they all had kind of like a calling card. The great Green Bay Packers teams of the '60s ran the ball. Okay, the Packers sweep and so forth. Bart Starr was good, but he wasn't Joe Montana. Let's face it. Okay, they ran the ball down your throats. They could win with 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of style. And then you just look at some of the great teams. The '80s was all about the 49ers and the Montana Rice John Taylor thing, and they didn't have much of a running game. It was complimentary to Roger Craig, yes, but it was more about Montana and Rice and John Taylor and Brent Jones and Dwight Clark and so forth. And they all had the thing they kind of hung their hat on. Okay. And that's fine. That's great. Some of the Baltimore Ravens teams, the great Ravens teams, always hung their hat on defense when they had Ray, help me out, Lewis and Ed Reed and those guys. Okay, fine. But the Lions seem to not really, you can't really say, well, they hang their hat on one thing, because they can win, as Dan Campbell kind of laughed about. They asked him after the game yesterday. Somebody said something to the effect of, were you surprised that your team was able to play this well outside in the elements? And he just kind of laughed and said, we can play anywhere. We'll play in the mud. We'll play in the snow. We'll play in the rain. We'll play just because we're an indoor team. It doesn't matter. But it's beyond the weather. Beyond the weather, they can beat you by running the ball down your throats. If they feel like they want to run the ball down your throats, they'll do that. If they feel like they've got to open it up a little bit and get guys downfield and pass the ball, they'll do that. If they feel like they can pull a special teams play out of their hat. They've got the best punter in the NFL. They've got the trick plays, of course, which that is that's more window dressing. I understand that, but they can beat you in different venues. They've gone now on the road to beat the Packers and the Vikings, which is not easy to do, especially in one season. You mentioned J-Mo, miss him for 2 weeks. You don't even notice that he's not there. Aiden Hutchinson, they're 3-0 since he went down with a broken leg. Now, they're probably going to do something tomorrow, and we'll talk about that with the trade deadline to fix that. But, 3-0 after Hutchinson, after everybody thought the world was going to end when he went down, they just can beat you. And now the other thing too, Al and Nick, Jared Goff is in the last 2 games. You look at his numbers. I think it was 12 for 15 against the Titans for 85 yards. But he threw 3 touchdown passes in those 15 attempts, and in those 85 yards, he got 3 touchdown passes. He did not have great numbers, eye-popping numbers against the Packers. Why? He didn't have to. He didn't have to. They had the running game going. They capitalized in that game. The Titans, the Titans were turning the ball over left and right, and the Lions they didn't have a drive that was more than 50 yards.
I've never seen an entire game before in my life like that.
Yeah, so that's why they were able to get so many points on so little yardage. And so they don't have to. Goff doesn't have to be Matthew Stafford. Back in the day, if Matthew Stafford wasn't throwing for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, the Lions would probably not win the game, because that's the only way they could win is if Matthew Stafford had a game like that. Now, Goff is like the modern-day Bob Greasy. 15 passes, maybe I'll throw 150 yards passing. Doesn't matter, because they've got so many ways to win, and they capitalize on your mistakes. And the Packers made a lot of them yesterday.
Yeah.
I'll add one more to what you're saying is, remember, they lost Brian Branch pretty early on, too.
Right,
yes,
right.
He got booted from the game, and, it didn't matter.
Right.
And actually, the Packers were the ones that had more trouble with the elements, with shitty passes, dropping balls, and overthrow, So they had more of a problem than the Lions did. So.
Yeah, that reminded me of the I forgot the Packers player that said that this morning. That came out on Twitter. I'm sure you guys saw it. Where it was something that we heard the Lions
Jenkins
say for years was, we made mistakes, but we're still the better team. The only reason we lost is because we made mistakes. No, we're still the better team. It's like, what? So isn't that the point of better teams don't make mistakes? And I think that's really kind of sums up the Lions guys right now, is that they make very few mistakes. Very, very few mistakes. Goff is not turning the ball over at all.
Right.
They're not fumbling, and they're forcing turnovers. That Kirby Joseph play was, I mean, what was Love thinking on that? If he takes the sack, they go to the half and they're just down, what they were down, they would have been down, 10?
Yeah.
Instead, he throws that stupid ball. Yeah. Joseph's right there to take it in for a pick six, and they're down 17 going into the half. That was essentially the game right there. So at that point, and then the Lions got the ball back to start the second half, drive it down and score. Game's over. The Lions essentially just shut down their offense, so they didn't need to do anything.
Right.
And when they did need to get a couple first downs, they had no problem doing it.
Right.
So it was. And that was the difference right there. I mean, how many drop passes did the Packers have yesterday?
Oh.
And the other thing was, it was not just that they were dropped; they weren't very accurate either.
Right.
Some of those drops hit guys in the hands, but they were reaching behind them, or or they were not easy catches at all. Meanwhile, Goff is just hitting guys right in the breadbasket right now. I mean, they couldn't drop if they tried.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, there were a lot of overthrown passes by Love. I mean, he just where the hell is this thing going? And I'm guessing it was a slippery ball too. So,
well, Goff was throwing with the same ball, I thought,
but he was wearing gloves, and Love wasn't. And people were kind of making fun of that before the game. Oh, what's it going to be like with him playing with gloves? It sure as hell worked, because he was throwing a nice tight ball again yesterday, and he was hitting. What was it? And they had that ridiculous stat they showed on there that.
Oh yeah,
on the last 30 targets of Amon-Ra have all been complete.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That is. That's like. Boom, mind blowing.
Yeah, that was mind blowing. Yeah, I think one of the best passes I've seen Goff throw this year was that touchdown on 4th and 3. Yeah. First of all, just before you mentioned mistakes, not all the mistakes were on offense. Yeah. If you remember, they were going to go for it on 4th and 5 and a half. Right. And excuse me. And I wasn't really feeling that decision, but Campbell's going to do Campbell things, but they purposely, I guess they wanted to draw they thought they could draw the Packers offside. Yeah. They had something, and they did. If you saw Goff, he right away clapped and pointed, almost like he expected that to happen. Right. So now it's 4th and 2.5 or 3 or whatever. So it's kind of the same thing as a 2-point conversion.
It became like a 2-point conversion.
Yeah, but the pass that Goff threw and the catch that St. Brown made on that play, tight window, ball could only be one place. It wasn't a pitch and catch. It had to be precision timed, and there's no way the defender could. It was amazing. That was and given the elements and given the situation, that to me, that was the touchdown. Put them, of course, 7-3. I think they kind of broke the Packers almost after that. That was really. I mean, and the Love thing was bad too. The pick six, but that was at the time of the game that happened. If the Lions didn't make that, the crowd would have been into it. They would still have been down 3-0. Fans at home would have been saying, Campbell, you're an idiot. But I mean, that was a great pass.
And that was after the Packers had an 8-minute drive and had to settle for a field goal.
Right.
Yeah, and that was the first of a few daggers of that game. And we really should talk about Goff's numbers. His numbers are absolutely mind-boggling right now. Obviously, yesterday he was 18 for 22, 145 yards in that touchdown. Over the last 6 games, Goff has the highest completion percentage in NFL history, 82.6%. He's 106 out of 128 throws. Oh. And his passer rating over the past 6 games is 140.1. Oh. And perfect is like what, 150? I think it's 152
or 58 or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I think exactly. Yeah.
That is absolutely nuts. I mean, I for lack of a better, bananas. So let's use bananas. I like that better. But that is a quarterback, I think, at this point. And Jared Goff, he's around 30 years old now. He's been in the league for a long time. This is a guy who looks so confident right now.
Yeah.
And and the Lions aren't asking him to make Matthew Stafford-like throws.
Right.
He's hitting some tight window stuff, but he's not throwing sidearm. He's not throwing on the run. He's not.
Right.
He is just running it off. And that's one thing that they keep telling us is that this is not just Ben Johnson's offense. This is Johnson's and Goff's offense. The Goffense, and that Jared Goff has put a lot into how they've set up the offense essentially for his maximum comfort, and he is actually running it like this offense right now is like a Swiss mechanical watch right now. Mm-hmm. It is just running perfectly, despite injuries, despite weather. They are just, and there is the occasional hiccup like that reverse they tried to run in the fourth quarter yesterday.
Yeah.
But that, every once in a while I just think that they do that because the players love those kind of plays. But regardless of all that,
right?
Jared Goff, for a guy we all thought, I know Greg and I said the same. We both thought, this is the bridge quarterback. This is the guy who's going to be around for a couple years till the draft picks kick in and they can find their quarterback. And all of a sudden, we got the Lions. I wouldn't say all of a sudden over going into 4 years now. The guy is a legitimate MVP. He probably won't win it because he won't have the eye-popping numbers because of this offense. But he is a legit guy who's going to get MVP votes this year, and deservedly so.
Sure.
Did you ever think you'd hear about a Lions quarterback being even in the running for MVP?
No, never.
It's so bizarre.
Occasionally, Stafford would pop up after one of those stupid, those crazy games.
Uh-huh.
And he would then he would have a 4-pick game, and that would be it. So, but not to the length that they're comparing. I think they're pretty much saying that right now the MVP leaders are Goff and Baltimore's quarterback, Lamar
Jackson.
Yeah, and he's playing out of his mind as well. But yeah, you're right. It's like they literally have, for the first time in my lifetime, a quarterback who can be legitimately talked about top 5 right now easily. And that's the thing though, guys. People still don't buy into Jared Goff. I don't get it at this point. When you go online or you hear people sometimes on sports talk radio, Goff crumbles under pressure. Goff can't handle a pass rush. Goff turns into Jared Goof. I think that guy is gone at this point, don't you think? I think Jared Goof is no more.
I was watching.
He'll have games occasionally, but all quarterbacks do.
I was watching Pro Football Talk segment today. Chris Sims and Mike, was it Florio or Fiorio? I can't remember how to pronounce it.
Yeah. Yep.
And they were talking about, Florio was saying, they were both saying the Lions are the best team in the league right now. But Florio said, I would love to find out what the magic potion is. What did Dan Campbell do or say to unlock Jared Goff? Something, he did something. He says, and I don't know if it's ever really going to come out what he did with this guy to unlock the potential that was not that we didn't see in LA. Even though he went to the Super Bowl, he had a pretty good record there. He won a lot, regular season wins, got some, went to the big game. But it ended, as we all have talked about in this program, it ended badly. Okay, fine. But Florio said, I would love to find out what it was that unlocked this guy. Because like you said, Al, he's playing with immense, and we've talked about this a couple weeks ago, and Nick was mentioning the same thing about when you get thrown under the bus by your coach, like what McVay did with Goff. Yeah. But he is, like Nick said, I'll never forget what Nick said. He said he is thriving, Goff is, in Detroit. Mm-hmm. And he is. And what happened? I mean, what was it? Is it Ben Johnson? Is it Mark Brunell? Obviously, he's got a great support staff with the coaching. Is it Campbell? I mean, what is it? I don't know. I mean, that to me is one of the. It's funny, Al. To your point, it's not gonna get the same kind of play He's not a true reclamation project. Right. He's not. It's not like he was on the trash heap like Kurt Warner was bagging groceries before in the next year he's in the Super Bowl. But it is in a way a reclamation project with Goff because of the way it ended in LA. And at the time that his confidence was probably pretty low. So I think it is kind of a reclamation project, but it won't be looked at that way because if you look at his numbers, it's not like he had a real drop-off year and came back from a horrible season, and his numbers are always kind of consistent. But to me, it is a reclamation project because it seems like he's gotten better and better every year. And like you said, he's only 30, and quarterbacks can play solidly until the mid to late 30s anymore if they stay healthy. So he's got hopefully another 5-6 good years left in him. But I wonder what happened with this guy. What did the Lions do to unlock him?
Yeah. I'm gonna jump in on that one because I've been thinking about this too, and I've said it before. It is a support of Dan Campbell and the front office supporting him, no question. And maybe I'll put it out this way: maybe it's just a perception that his play dropped off in LA because McVay was bitching about it.
Yeah, true, could be.
And there were some expectations of McVay's he didn't meet, and McVay was public about it. So, right. But if you look at Goff's numbers in LA, I don't know if they really ever dropped off.
Right.
They had better, they had good teams, they had bad teams, and but here Campbell backs up every single one of those guys.
Right.
And I'm going to say this too, and I haven't heard this lately, but I have a feeling I'll eventually hear it if I pay closer attention, is that Goff is not that stupid. He's not a leader. He's a game manager bullshit that I hear all the time. Just that idiotic thing. And no, Goff is playing very well. He's throwing some balls into coverage and threading needles. It's not just, pick some safe passes for Goff to throw so he doesn't get a pick. He's hitting his receivers and his receivers are catching them. They trust one another. So he's way more than a game manager. He deserves MVP.
For 4,500 yards, pure and simple.
No, they don't. Year after year. No, he's a fabulous player. I never thought he was a bridge quarterback, to be honest. And I just couldn't believe it when they say, "Oh, we're going to get this rookie quarterback that we're going to, we're going to bring him up." Whatever. In this case, it just happens to be Hooker, and Goff will be there just for a little while. It's like, no, you guys are missing the point. And rookie quarterbacks, no matter how much hype, are a crapshoot. I think they showed. I think someone might have been on Twitter posted all these recent, high pick quarterbacks like Bryce Young and Justin Fields and all of these other guys that have been picked really high recently, and they've all been benched. They've literally all been benched.
Yeah,
because they're playing like rookie quarterbacks or like young quarterbacks. So
yeah. Look at all the quarterbacks that got huge contracts this past offseason. The only one who was really playing up to that level of contract right now was Jared Goff.
Yes.
Dak Prescott got $60 million a year. Jordan Love got a similar contract, and he makes some of the stupidest throws you'll ever see, like we saw yesterday. I mean, some of the and people laughed at Goff making that kind of money, and he's like, I think he's proven that the Lions were honestly got a deal on the guy. If he's not going to continue to be this insanely hot. He's not going to. It'd be almost impossible to have an 82% completion percentage over an entire season. But he's proven well worth the money at this point. Because he's playing the most important position, probably not even in football, but in sports, quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, you're looking for a quarterback. If you have a quarterback, you're trying to keep him healthy and keep him happy. And the Lions are doing a great job of that so far. But what about the pass rush, guys? I think they had 7. I think I saw they had 6 or 7 pressures yesterday, and I think 5 or 6 of them were from Ali McNeil, which says value. And I think one of the other pressures came off the blitz with that on Love's interception where Anzalone was blitzing. So they got to do something at the edge. And yesterday news came out. There was rumors flying across the social media that the Lions are on the verge of acquiring Cleveland Browns defensive end Zadarius Smith, 32-year-old veteran. I think he's played for every damn team in the NFC North at this point as well if he goes to Detroit. He's a 10-year vet, has 5 sacks this season, 65 for his career, 3-time Pro Bowler. I believe he's had 3 seasons with double-digit sacks. And he's under contract for 1 more year. It sounds like, if not, this might be the Smith guys might be the guy who, between a team willing to sell, and he's not so young where they're going to get you they're going to want a big return, and he still has some juice left in the tank. This is looking like the guy that Lions have figured out. This is going to be what's the word I'm looking for? This is the best combination. This is what's the best we're going to be able to find available because Max Crosby's not coming. Some of the other big-time edges are not coming. It's just not going to happen. So if the Lions end up with Smith, Nick, think that I'm not going to say I'm not going to ask you if it's enough, but do you think? I mean, I'm not going to say it's not going to replace Aiden Hutchinson, but do you think it's going to be enough to get them through the playoffs?
I don't know actually that much about Smith, so it's hard for me to say. But they obviously felt for sure that they needed somebody to compensate as much as they can for Hutchinson.
Right.
Hutchinson is coming back next year, if not at the Super Bowl, according to everything I've heard.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling Hutchinson's going to have a hell of a payday, so they don't want to bring in some monster contract. And give up a bunch, give up a bunch of draft picks for some guy that they may need for maybe a year or 2. So I'm guessing that's what they're thinking.
You're right about the contract. That makes a lot of sense there.
So, I mean, Hutchinson would be worth that contract, but do they want to take on a Max Crosby contract? Because he ain't going to be cheap. Even though he may not cost a lot in draft picks or whatever, may or may not. He's going to hit the ledger, and
could any team afford $60 million a year in defensive ends? That's because if you got Max Crosby, that's what you would end up with when you finally max out Hutchinson as well.
Right?
It'd be crazy kind of amount of money, but the money that definitely has to be playing into what they're Nick what they're playing into. They have to figure they're trying to balance. They got to keep the books balanced because as Greg let us know earlier tonight that when the Saints fired their head coach tonight, and that team is $61 million above next year's salary cap. And
I couldn't believe that. That's insane.
Yes, they've been kicking the can forward over and over and over, and it's really come home to roost, as they say. So you're right. The Lions have to kind of manage. We need a defensive end, but we also have to think about extensions for guys we want to keep. Hutchinson's going to be eligible for an extension next year, for example. They have a lot of young players who are going to cost money. Kirby Joseph,
Branch.
Yeah,
Branch is going to cost money.
Yes, exactly. Are they going to keep Anzawike, for example, who's really had a kind of a breakout season, in the interior? There's a lot of they got a lot of things to juggle here, when it comes to contracts, so you don't end up like the Saints. So, Greg, where do you fall on this? I know when this first happened, I think everybody was like, as they would say, you go into Rams mode, say fuck all the picks. You do whatever it does to get someone like Max Crosby. I think now saner heads have kind of come to realize as nice as that sounds, one, it's not going to happen, and as Nick says, they probably couldn't afford it anyway.
Well, you have a scenario where when a player of that magnitude goes down, the first thing you want to do, the fans immediately go to, we must replace him with the second best guy in the NFL. It's never, let's just try to get some people in here to help out. It's no, let's reach for the stars, and we have to replace a Hutchinson with a Max Crosby, or the season's over. We got to, take one All-Pro guy. He's out, so we got to replace him with another All-Pro guy. Yeah, it'd be great if you could do that, of course. But there are ramifications to doing that, for sure. And here's the other thing, too. Whoever they bring in, and I'm confident that they will do something, whether it's Smith or whomever, but it looks like it's, according to everybody, I've seen a lot of reports that it is Smith. I'm kind of surprised it wasn't already announced. Maybe they're just kind of working out the finer details, but it was reported yesterday by some pretty good sources that it was happening either last night or today, the Smith to Detroit thing. Well, the thing is that whoever they bring in doesn't have to be lights out. It only has to be good for like half a season. They just need some. They just need some help to get some pressure. They don't have to bring in a Crosby type guy. We just got them talking about how the lines are deep, and you miss JMO. You don't even notice it. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, Sam Laporta hardly ever gets the ball anymore. You don't notice that either. Why? Because they've got so much other stuff going on. Brian Branch, Nick mentioned Brian Branch going out yesterday with the ejection, I think sometime early in the second quarter. Okay. Kirby Joseph gets a pick six. They're able to cover. They've got some, they got some help on the corners now that they can. So yeah, I would love if they could just replace an All-Pro with another All-Pro, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I think if they can just get a little bit more help, a little bit more juice in the pass rush, they don't have to have. They're 3-0 without him. They're 3-0 without Hutchinson. I know everybody's wringing their hands and they're watching the game and they say, well, there's no pressure. You mentioned the pressure number, low pressure number. I get it, but they're winning. They're 3-0 since Hutch went down. Now, is that a coincidence? Well, all I know is they're undefeated since Hutch went down. That's all I know. So, I mean, do with that with what you will. Yes, they could use some help, of course. And I think they'll do something. But you don't have to replace an All-Pro with an All-Pro to or the sky's falling. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah,
it's it's a new world with the Lions. So you don't have to desperately hold on to your All-Pro players anymore, or it's like, remember when they were still SOL, they'd have like one all-star or all-pro player, and you'd try and hold on to him for dear life because the rest of the team sucked royally, right? And then so if you replace, you lose him, like you lose Barry Sanders, all of a sudden, we got to get on the next Barry Sanders, all of us, to get their fix. So, you're just grasping for straws because the team sucks otherwise. Like that's all you have. Your only hope is that one really good player, that's your only reason to watch. But you don't have that situation with the Lions. Hutchinson goes down, the rest of the team closes in and still plays at a very high level too. So it's a really different animal now than it used to be. So yeah. Plus, there's another thing that I think Campbell and Holmes always emphasize too is, are they a fit for our culture as a team?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Maybe Max Crosby wouldn't be a fit for the culture. Maybe Myles Garrett wouldn't be a fit for the culture. Who knows? I have no idea. I don't know how they measure that necessarily. But if you look at the guys that they have playing, they're all play with a chip on their shoulder. Amon-Ra St. Brown is like, he's in a bad mood not really a bad mood, but he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's, out for blood. He wants to win.
Yeah.
He reminds me of Steve Smith. Remember Steve Smith for the Panthers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
St. Brown reminds me of Steve Smith in terms of that chip on his shoulder kind of a thing. He kept all those names of all those receivers that were. He still has it. The list of all those receivers that were drafted ahead of him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way he is.
But he's also a good teammate, so it's not like he's looking for individual accolades necessarily.
Right.
But he's so that's a big part of it. But basically, all those guys are going to do everything they can to try and win.
Yeah.
So.
All right, we're getting a little low on time, so let's move on to the Detroit Red Wings because we've heaped too much praise on one franchise. Now we need to shit on the other one. But,
we didn't shit enough on the Pistons, huh?
Yeah. The biggest news that the Red Wings made this past couple of weeks is that they made another trade. They traded Ali Mata. They traded all the umlauts to the Utah Hockey Club for a third-round pick in the 2025 draft. The main reason, supposedly the deal was made because it opened up, they were at the cap, it opened up $3.5 million in cap space and a roster spot so they could bring back from injury Tyler Mate. Since the end of last season, guys, now think of it this way. The Wings have traded two of their top 6 defensemen, Mata and Jake Wallman, and a second-round pick. And what have they gotten in return? A third-round pick. That's it. What kind of asset management is that from the team's general manager? I'll let you go, Nick.
I'm actually, I don't know is the short answer. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like,
yeah.
I thought Yzerman, going into last season, I thought Yzerman's trying to get them to win.
Yep.
He's, making some free agent signings to help boost up the team while young guys are getting, up to speed and getting, NHL ready. And he didn't sign a lot of guys to any ridiculous contracts back then. I think the only big contract he put out there last year was Dylan Larkin's, which even that's kind of reasonable. I think Larkin is definitely earning his money. But, this year they signed Raymond and Sider to some really long contracts, and it's more than $8 million a pop each. So, and I didn't realize they'd get into such salary cap trouble doing that. But then again, they also traded away Wallman and cleared out cap space because they were going to sign somebody and throw big money at them that they never did. So you figured they had some room in there because of that. But
apparently they don't.
Apparently, and they're considered an older team in the league. And I'm like, what? That was really bizarre to me. And so I don't know what to make of what's going on. I don't know. I've always asked this, what is the Yzer plan? Nobody could ever answer that. I can't.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And other than in Stevie we trust, that's probably about it. And I don't know what he's doing. I honestly don't know where it's going. They're a boring team right now. Honestly, they're really boring to watch. So
yeah, it's one thing to be bad in rebuilding, but to be bad, old, and boring, that's an ugly mix. I don't know about you, Greg, but I know Steve Yzerman is not going to get on the hot seat. But you would have to think at some point, seats somewhere are going to start getting warm, be it for Derek Lalone or be it for possibly the pro scouting guys. Because most of these free agent signings they've made for the most part have not really worked out. I mean, the two guys they have this year, they signed both Eric Gustafsson and Vladimir Tarasenko to replace Shane Gostisbehere and David Perron. However it's pronounced. Neither one of those guys have come close to doing what the guys they let walk for similar or less money. I don't know what's going on in the front office, Greg. I really don't.
Well, I wrote a column last week about Lalone, Coach Lalone, and how I didn't feel like the Red Wings players were totally bought into him. And I made the comparison because now we're kind of spoiled with Dan Campbell and his culture, AJ Hinch seems to have a good thing going with the Tigers, even though that's another story about what they need roster wise. But as far as like his relationship with the players and so forth, it seems to be really good. And even the Pistons have been talking about how things got a breath of fresh air with JB and things are new. And, they kind of, they like they're beating the crap out of the Lakers tonight, by the way. Yeah. So it's like, well, then you look at the Red Wings and I just sometimes, Al, in answer to your question, sometimes players, and you mentioned the free agents signings, it's funny how when you've built something that people want to be a part of, and the Lions have built something that other teams in the NFL want to be a part of, and they don't kid yourself. There are a lot of players playing on other teams right now that would love to be playing in Detroit, and because players talk with it, you see them on the field after the games. It's all a big fraternity. Those players. They talk with each other, and they know what's going on here in Detroit. Mm-hmm. Conversely, there's something also to be said for when you bring a guy in like a Tarasenko, who now you could make the argument that, well, maybe he was already kind of on the downside. Mm-hmm. His numbers weren't that impressive in recent years. I get it. But you just look at it seems like, Al, when you and I were enjoying the glory days of the 90s and early 2000s with the Stanley Cups, that it didn't matter who they brought in, who the Red Wings brought in. Ken Holland would always make a trade at the trade deadline, bring in a 35-year-old guy, and he'd find the fountain of youth, and he'd be reborn. He'd be a key player in the playoffs. Look what Larry Murphy did. Yeah. Murphy was literally booed out of Toronto. Mm-hmm. They brought him in. Murph was probably 36, 37 at the time. They brought him in, and he was completely reborn. Why? Because it was a winning culture. It was a team that was on the verge of winning a Stanley Cup. Brendan Shanahan told me that when the league wanted him out of Hartford, the league wanted him in Washington. He said, no, I want to go to Detroit because I know what they need over there. They need a player like me, and he was right. And they would bring in these guys, off-season signings, and they didn't even have to be big name guys. They would just bring in these people, they'd fit them in, and everybody was like, it was contagious, the winning thing. Look at what's going on now. You bring in these players, and I don't know, they just don't seem to, it seems like the opposite is happening. Instead of being reborn in Detroit or reclaiming their old touch, if you will, they just come here and look older, look worse. I'm going to pick on Tarasenko because he's got 2 goals in 8 games. He hasn't been much of a factor whatsoever. Kane hasn't even been. I mean, Kane's been okay. Yeah. But I mean, you just look at, he brought in Petrie, who's obviously better years were behind him. I don't know, to Nick's point, I don't know either what Steve's trying to do other than buy time for the kids to come through the Grand Rapids pipeline. But I don't even know if that's necessarily the panacea. And you're both right. They do play a very boring style of hockey, especially if they get the lead. Every game they've won, if you look at the 5 games they've won this year, they've all been because they've relied on their goaltender to save it, to steal the game in the last 10 minutes of the game. There's no stepping on the gas if they got a lead. It's all dump and chase, and they don't. I wrote in my piece last week. They sometimes they forget the chase part. They never carry the puck in the other team's zone. They get 25 shots a game sometimes. In today's NHL, you got to get getting 35, 36 shots a game. You can't get 25 shots a game and win a lot of hockey games in today's NHL. And that's what they do. They actually won a game. I can't remember what it was a couple weeks ago. They got like 11 shots. It was on the island. They got like 11 shots, and they won the game because they relied on their goalie to bail them out. It's not winning hockey. It's not how you do it.
I'll add in too. I forget who they were playing, but there was one game I think they actually won. But when the other team went on the power play, it was almost a guaranteed goal by the other team.
Right.
I can't remember which game it was. It was like every damn time they went on the power play, goal. It didn't take long at all. They might have even lost that game, but it was just like the penalty kill was so bad.
Right.
You might as well not have even been there. So, and it's like, completely boring. This is where I wish they had, fighting still in hockey. At least we would have that. or might have had that. So, but yeah, they're just not that interesting to watch, honestly.
And that's a bad thing. It's
so
and as we were all kind of when we were all in a group text a few days ago, it was like, how much longer is Malone going to be here? Because he's the most likely place they're going to make a change. And I know the fans have long already soured on him. And it really feels like, as Greg says, that the locker room could give two shits about the guy. And he really does not give off. You don't have to have a Dan Campbell behind the bench.
Right.
Not every coach has to be a rah-rah,
right.
A player's coach or whatever. There are different ways of motivating players. But what in the hell is Malone doing right now? I don't see anything coming from him at this point, other than the occasional line mixing.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I was thinking more about the players that they did sign. It's like these are sort of like they're maybe a little bit better than role players that have just kind of like this, grind line level role in the team, but they're not like your first line guys that are in the first two lines of the team. And like I'm thinking of Comfer. Comfer's not that good. Or Cop. It's like they're kind of meh to begin with, and you rely heavily on meh.
Top two lines that should be third and fourth line guys. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what you said. So.
But yeah, that's a great point. And these are guys that were brought in on free agent contracts, for Christ's sake.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's kind of depressing as well. I mean, the Pistons, we all knew they were bad. I didn't think before last season, I didn't think they were 14 win bad. That surprised me. I didn't think they would win that few games. I didn't know. I couldn't predict that Monty Williams was going to be the disaster that he was. I don't think any of us saw that coming. No. It was what it was. But, the Red Wings, though, I think what's got fans disappointed, and maybe it's partially because of that tease of almost making the playoffs last year, but I think what's depressing, and I go on Red Wings Reddit a lot during the games, and I go on the game threads, and particularly when they're playing a team like the Rangers or Winnipeg or, the upper echelon teams, which you're really not expecting them to beat anyway. But what's got fans depressed isn't that the Red Wings lose those games, because they're expected to lose those games more often than not. It's the way they lose them. It's the realization of how far away the Red Wings are from being an upper echelon team. Because when they play an upper echelon team, like the Rangers and the Jets, you really, and the Leafs to a certain degree, you see how deficient they are and how far away they are from being an elite NHL team. And they're just in one of they're in that middle meh, like Nick says, meh grouping of boring. Toss them all up onto the staircase, and however they fall down is where they're going to finish, because they're all around the same. And that's where the Red Wings are. And the fans, they're still, and it's funny to say this because they haven't made the playoffs in 8 years, but there are enough people that were around in the glory days that vividly remember when the Red Wing emblem meant excellence. And even in the years when they didn't win the Stanley Cup, they were in the mix. Al, how many years in a row would they go to training camp? And even if they were knocked out in the first round the year before, how many years they would go to training camp and be talked about as a Stanley Cup contender, a legitimate contender, because their talent level. And sometimes they'd go out in the second round, sometimes they'd go to the conference finals, but they were always in the mix. They were always talked about in that breath of being the upper echelon in the NHL. A lot of fans still remember those days. And it's depressing for them to accept the fact that they right now are a mediocre team that winged wheel has lost a lot of its luster, and they're just in the same breath as the Sabres and the Islanders and the Nashville team and the Columbus team. They're just nothing special. There's nothing special about them. And when they play these really good teams, they get blown out of the building more often than not. And that's what's depressing to these folks is the realization that that the dichotomy and the difference in talent level between the Red Wings and these upper echelon teams 6 years now, 5-6 years into Steve's tenure, is depressing, because you would think that by now they would have, be able to be talked about as a team that could possibly give these other teams a run. And in most nights they're just outclassed. And that's depressing to see your team outclassed by the best of the league. You'd like to think that they can play with these teams, but the realization is they can't.
Yeah, they're exactly where you don't want to be at this point. They're in the mushy middle.
Yep.
They're not bad enough to really be able to count on getting a decent draft pick, other than if they get super, super lucky in the lottery. And they're not good enough they're essentially a playoff bubble team on their best day.
Right.
That's not where you want to be. That means you're going to be stuck drafting likely in the teens.
Yep.
It's going to be almost impossible. And this is what we said. We've been saying this for years. The Wings need an impact player. They don't have it. The best way to get an impact player is to get him in the draft. And between either a little lack of lottery luck and just not being able to draft one, period, to find one, they're a team kind of adrift in that, we're okay. We might make the playoffs, but we'll likely be a first round knockout if we are. And if we don't make the playoffs, we're probably going to end up have a mediocre draft pick. And that's
but you know what though,
to be.
And you're right. I mean, you're right about the impact player thing for sure. Mm-hmm. But when you look at where everybody was going crazy about Connor Bedard. Oh my God, Connor Bedard. Gotta have this kid. Gotta have him. Mm-hmm. He's a 1-1. Okay, fine. So he gets drafted 1-1. The Blackhawks still stink. They're not any good. This is year 2 now of Bedard. Bedard is okay. He's got 12 points in 13 games, 3 goals. All right. I mean, he had 20 what he had 22 goals last year. Now he only played 68 games. Okay, so maybe that's like a 25, 27 goal pace if he played 82. I mean, for everything I know he's young, he's only 19 still, but for everybody was crawling over them, got to have Connor Bedard. Yeah. Well, the Blackhawks still stink, and he's not great, at least not yet. I mean, maybe he'll get better. He's not setting the world on fire. He was minus 44 last year. You look at the early years of Lemieux, the early years of Gretzky, the early years of McDavid, even Austin Matthews. It took time. They didn't go to their respective teams and make those teams Stanley Cup contenders overnight. So the lottery luck thing or whatever, we talked about this last time. Mm-hmm. It's not just about that. You gotta get. It's not just let's have a 1-1. Look at the Spurs with Wemby. They're still no good. Mm-hmm. They're not any good.
They're downright lousy.
Okay, we got to have Wemby. Oh my God, we lost Wemby. That was the guy we wanted. Mm-hmm. Okay, well the Spurs got him. The Spurs aren't any good. You got to build around these kids, and the Blackhawks stink. They're horrible, and they were bad last year when they had the great Bedard. You got to have more than that. You got to be able to acquire and develop and draft and trade and coach up and that's how you do it. And of course you need an impact player. Of course, that would be immensely helpful right now. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that if you were to take Connor McDavid off of Edmonton and plop him in Red Wings uniform, that the Red Wings would be a playoff team. It doesn't mean that.
What would probably happen is that they would put a lot of, expect like basically getting deep into the playoffs because of Connor McDavid, and he's not going to be able to do it alone.
Right.
There's just no way. And you'll have these unreal expectations if you had some superstar, because you need a team around that person.
Right.
Because that person goes down, then what? I mean, look at the Red Wings now. Dylan Larkin goes down. They're screwed. Mm-hmm. Last season demonstrated that. Yeah. Even with the great Patrick Kane on there, what the hell happened? They couldn't buy themselves a victory. Right. So And it just basically takes Dylan Larkin every night to just go play out of his mind for them to even have a shot. So, I think Larkin's fine. Is he a superstar? No, he's kind of a difference maker for the Red Wings for what they are. But they're just kind of, I don't know, just meh. I don't know what else to say. It's like there's nothing there. The great Red Wings teams, even in years where they sucked, it was very clear we're in to play for a championship. We're going to play. We're going to give it everything we got. We're going to throw everything at it to try and win a championship. And then if it doesn't work out in 1 year, we're going to make adjustments because that's what we're trying to do. Honestly, I used to think that's what Yzerman was doing, but I feel more like he's taking the Scott Harris approach of, we're going to win one day, but we're not good enough now. We're going to play the young guys. And that is really boring. Wait, the Detroit Tigers are going to be boring next year, is my guess. That's my prediction. And
it could be, yeah.
It could very well be. I mean, like by dumb luck, they got into the playoffs.
Right.
The circumstances were those were all anomalies that got them there. This could have been anomalies that could have gotten the Red Wings on the cusp of the playoffs last year. And we talked about it. It's like, so now Yzerman's in the position. It's like, are they going to take another step forward from what they did this past season? Or are they going to go back? Like, we'll probably really be able to tell, like, say in January and February, which is usually when the team just started tanking the last several years. They started off reasonably. They started off okay, and they're starting off kind of meh to okay, but nothing exciting. But December and January and February is when we'll know which way this is going for sure. So.
And I think with that, that's a good spot to kind of wrap things up with meh. And we'll
meh.
And we'll go on to the home stretch, the finish line, as you would call it, and that would be our jerk of the week. Nick, who's your jerk of the week?
I'm going to take a little bit. I don't think it's a who. It's Democrats and Republicans. So I was watching the Lions game yesterday, and God, I hated the political ads. I don't care which party it is. I don't care who you vote for. Those ads made me sick. And when you have like the ads during sporting events, they kind of like ease you into the ad. These things were like obnoxious from the very beginning. And I just couldn't stand it. I can't wait for this fucking election to be over and put in with whatever useless person we're going to have in the White House. But I couldn't stand the ads. That was just too much for me. I don't watch a lot of TV. I'll watch the games, or I'll watch YouTube mostly, or Netflix without the ads. So I don't see this shit normally. And God, I hated that when I watched the football games.
Yeah, it was pretty incessant.
Yeah, I'm watching the game yesterday, the Lions game, and there comes an ad. We're on the verge of World War III. I'm like, what?
I just want to watch some football.
It hits you right in the head, right? Like from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's obvious why they're doing it, because the only things that people watch live anymore where they have a captive audience is live sports. You can't fast forward through a game. It's gotten to the point, I'm with you, Nick, where we just hit the mute button. What else can you do at this point? And and if you're getting convinced by a television ad, there's more wrong with you than who you're voting for anyway. Because they're both cherry. Yeah, Nick just covered it. That's well said. Because I was probably going to go there if you did. So Nick beat us to the punch when it comes to the endless political ads. And yes, thank God Wednesday's only a day. After tomorrow, things will be normal for about a year and a half. But I got Nick, is it it's really as bad out there in Washington? Because Michigan's considered a swing state, so we've been bombarded, Greg, for about a year now at this point. But I say the last 4 or 5 months it's really gotten bad. It's even bad out in Washington, which isn't considered a swing state.
I don't think it's quite as bad. Washington is kind of like a tale of two political spectra. Like, I think in terms of the geography of the state, I think more people are red than blue, but most of the population is blue. It's all around the Seattle area, so they tend to that tends to sway things over here.
Yeah,
it's just like a little purplish in pockets.
Yeah, doesn't part of Washington want to defect to Idaho or some goddamn thing?
That's fine by me. And
defect to Idaho.
Yeah, defect to Iowa.
Defect
Idaho, because Idaho's that's another whole story right there.
I don't see probably as much. I'm sure you guys are going to get swamped because you're one of the battleground states. But
that's like, oh god, yeah.
But like I'll hear this shit. I'm listening to Spotify and I'm listening to music, and all of a sudden one of these obnoxious political ads. I'm like, what the fuck?
And sometimes it's weird where they're coming. I was listening to. I do like to listen to old time radio shows late at night when I'm trying to fall asleep. Like the old Dragnet or Yours Truly or stuff like that. And I'm half asleep. All of a sudden, I get an ad for Sherrod Brown, Ohio's senator. Like what? That's this other thing. They're just thrown on there willy nilly, not always aiming. They're not always hitting the target they're supposed to target. Because I'm not a Sherrod Brown voter, sure. It seems like a nice enough guy, but I'm not an Ohio voter. So why in the hell am I hearing this shit? So yeah, I'm with you, Nick. It's going to be over in a day, and then we can all move on with our lives, hopefully. Greg, your turn. Who is your jerk of the week?
Well, when I read this, I was kind of going back and forth between. They're both from the Packers, by the way. You were talking about that I think his name was Jenkins, that offensive lineman who made that stupid comment that you were talking about now the best team didn't win, just the team that executed better. Okay.
Right. Well,
before the game, if you remember a day or two before the game, I think I've got one that might top that one. And this is my jerk of the week. Packers safety Xavier McKinney, who's very good. I think he's got the same amount of interceptions as Kirby Joseph has. So he's very good. Says he had an issue. McKinney had an issue because, as you know, the Lions were on this heater where they were scoring 40 points a game and stuff. He says, in my opinion, this is before the game. It's like Thursday or Friday. In my opinion, I think they try to embarrass people, McKinney said. Yeah. And I think this organization, the players we have in here, they don't really take that lightly. We know that's what they're going to come here and try to do. So I guess he thinks that the Lions have been running up the score to embarrass their opponents. Okay. Well, first of all, I beg to differ. Number one, I mean, first of all, this is the NFL. You're supposed to put on your big boy pants, and you're supposed to be able to, if it happens like that, you get beat 52-14 like they beat the Titans. Okay. I mean, did you deserve to lose 52-14? Yeah, probably. I don't. So I just think that, and then Ben Johnson countered and said, well, it's just the mentality of when we step on the field until the head coach tells us to let off the gas. We're trying to score a touchdown every time. It doesn't matter if we're up by 5 scores, down by 5 scores. That's just who we are, and that's what we believe in. And it's been that way since Coach Campbell got here. And don't forget when they blew out the Cowboys, when the Lions drew the ire of Chris Christie, we were laughing about that too. And he said that Dan Campbell is no class. I just think I find it kind of comical that these are pro players who think that the Lions are running up the score like this is college, like Michigan's playing, Slippery Rock or something. I mean, these are pro teams playing each other. Blowouts happen. Lions happen to be on a heater. If you can't stand the heat. I mean, one real quick story. When the Lions lost opening night in 1991 to the Redskins, 45-0 on TNT, national televised game. The Redskins had the ball at the Lions 3-yard line in the closing moments. Instead of running plays to try to score another touchdown to make it 52-0, they took knees. Mark Rippon took knees instead, took and ran the clock out. And Chris Spielman was livid after the game. He said, I don't want charity on the football field. I don't come out here to be felt sorry for. You come and you play until the final. He was mad. So you play until the final gun. I don't need charity. If you score a touchdown on us and make it 52-0, oh well. But don't you take a knee. He was furious. And that was the year that the Lions then went to the championship game against the Redskins. That was the Mike Utley year. And won 12 games, won the division, went to the championship game, beat Dallas in the playoffs, the whole 9 yards. But Spielman's thing was, I don't care what the score is. You play until the final gun goes off. And this is the NFL. I don't know why he thinks, this McKinney guy, thinks that the Lions are out there trying to embarrass people. I mean, my goodness.
I mean, I was thinking about that too. It's like if your opponent keeps turning the ball over and your offense's job is to score touchdowns, you're going to try and score touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not that complicated, right? Yeah. Maybe you should try improving your defense a little bit. Maybe you should try holding on to the ball and not turning it over to somebody.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, Nick, is none of those teams that the Lions played and beat like that said that. Nobody on the other team after the game said anything about the Lions embarrassed them on purpose or ran up the score. So why this McKinney guy has an issue with it?
Jerry Jones did, I think. I thought Jerry Jones whined about it.
No, who cares about him? He doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean,
the players.
Right. Exactly. You're absolutely right.
Yep, well said.
So,
I was, for my jerk of the week, I wasn't sure where I was going to go. At first, I thought maybe it was the dimwit who went after Jason Kelsey.
Oh yeah, right.
Who was the a college kid who essentially used a homophobic slur against his brother because he's dating Taylor Swift. So the whole thing of why he was homophobic when he's a grown man dating an attractive billionaire, and then he, of course, the other thing is, of course, I was surprised he was restrained as he was, but of course he also said something homophobic in return, and he apologized for it tonight on national television. Not what he did to the kid, but for the slur. But then I thought about what about a certain presidential candidate who said he was more Greek than the Greek freak himself, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was born in Greece, raised in Greece, plays for the Greek national team, and also carried the Greek flag in the Olympics, but I didn't want to go there either. I'm going to go a little more standard. I'm going to go with James Franklin, Penn State's head coach. Will he ever beat a team that's ranked higher than him? Ever? No. It'll never, ever happen. No, it's Penn State. No, this is what I heard. The best thing I heard about why they created a 12-team playoff is so coaches like James Franklin can keep their jobs because they say they got their team to the playoffs. Because he could never beat Michigan. He could never beat Ohio State. He can't beat good teams. It happened to him again losing to Ohio State this past week. And Penn State can't move on from him because he's got his buyout at this point, $56 million if you want to get out from essentially a guy who's going to win you 9 to 10 games every year, but never get you past that and never win you. Because Penn State, that I'm sure they still think we should be on the level of Ohio State or Michigan under Harbaugh or a level Kirby Smart at Georgia or whatever. Yet he's always going to be a level or two down. That's just his level. So my jerk of the week is Penn State and James Franklin for proving once again that everybody reached their level of incompetence. Franklin has done his at Penn State because he cannot win a big game to save his life. He never will.
And he's always bitchy too.
Yes, he got into it with a heckler after that game. It's like,
so what's new?
Dude? What's new? Yeah, what's heckler? Yeah, it's like, I don't know anymore. Anyway, let's wrap this up. We've run long, so with that out of the way, Greg, do your usual. Tell everybody where they can find us on social media, who we might have up for guests, and all that fun stuff.
Sure. First of all, thank you to Siddy Hall. We must do that.
Yes.
We appreciate him and his idea that we implemented tonight about talking about the differences in the NBA over the years. That was fun. I want to also remind you that in 2 weeks from tonight, we will be joined by the great Keith Gave. Our good friend Keith Gave will talk some hockey. We'll get a lot more deeper into the Red Wings, of course. Keith tells me he's working on another book, which he hopes to be able to talk about on our program in 2 weeks to be able to promote it. I'm not sure what it's about. We'll find out. Mm-hmm. So that'll be on the 18th. Looking forward to that. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow or subscribe to my Substack, gregeno.substack.com. I would appreciate that. I'll be in your inbox every Monday if you do subscribe. I want to, of course, thank my lovely wife, Sharon. And thank you guys for making Monday night so gosh darn fun.
And, of course, our West Coast correspondent, Nick Milanovich. Tell us where they can find you online.
Yes, it's pretty much all on Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call that platform now. Mm-hmm. And my handle is right there on the screen. It's at Nick Milanovich. Happy to chat about Detroit sports and commiserate when that's appropriate and praise our teams when that's appropriate as well. Plus, I'll talk about guitars and woodworking and stuff like that too. So, yes. And science.
Yes, just don't bring up political commercials.
I do stay away from politics on there. I do stay away.
He does. He does. I can vouch for that. Yeah,
I have kind of done that. I've spent most of my time on Facebook at this point. I want to stay away from. No one's being convinced of anything anymore. Anyway, everybody knows my politics at this point anyway. So what the hell? All right. As always, we would love it if you would like, share, and subscribe to the Knee Jerks podcast with Eno, Nick, and myself, Big Al. And if you can do so on numerous platforms such as Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public, Ghana. TheKneeJerks.net is our homepage where you'll find links to all the stuff. You'll find the links to where you can find the podcast. You'll find links to everybody's social media. You'll find links to Greg's Substack, which I heartily encourage you all to subscribe to. And that's where also you can download the MP3 if you like from there instead of going to one of these platforms. Also, I think I can't think of anything else to say, but I will probably be back up north for our next podcast. I'm sure I will be. So. Because we're going to be spending Thanksgiving up there in the Great White North. Well, I can't call it the Great White North anymore because, we were talking about we were going to winterize the camper, our RV, on this trip. The next 2 weeks, the lows are maybe around 40. The highs will be in the 50s and 60s. Like, right. No, we'll just keep running water.
Right, sure.
We're not going to freeze the thing up, so what the hell?
Right, exactly.
So, we don't want to have our Thanksgiving up there and have to, not be able to wash our dishes, in other words. So, but right. It's really weird that when it comes to weather, it's like our in Michigan anyway, fall and winter has been pushed back by a month. Or November is much more like October.
For sure.
I would bet you we probably won't get any big time snow if we get it at all. It'll be January. Won't be like it used to. I
only had to run my snowblower twice all year last year. Twice in
we
Michigan.
Didn't even run our snowmobiles last year.
Yeah.
What's a snowblower?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
See, look at him. He's doing stand up in front of the brick there. So, all right, let's get the hell out of here. We've run way long. So, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Like I said, Greg said, with Keith Gabe, who was a wonderful guest. Can't wait to talk to him. So until that time, 2 weeks from now, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Good night, everybody.
And Mr. Greg Eno.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.